it's like to be alone in the woods. But there's one place you'll never find on any map. A house in the forest, hidden by trees so thick, the sun barely makes it through. But what's even worse than the house itself is the secret it hides. What if I told you that not only does this house have a mind of its own, but it's also been there for hundreds of years waiting for someone to come close enough to hear its whispers? This isn't just a story about a creepy house, it's a story about what happens when curiosity leads you straight into the heart of a place that wants you there and will stop at nothing to keep you. Stick around, because this is no ordinary house in the woods. It's a place where things don't just happen. They happen for a reason. It all started with a group of friends. A simple trip into the woods to get away from the noise of the city. They were looking for adventure, for the thrill of something unknown. They didn't know that one wrong turn, one little misstep, would lead them straight to something that would change their lives forever. Or maybe end their lives altogether. They thought they were just getting lost in the wilderness. What they didn't realize was that they were walking straight into a trap. The forest was dense, thick with old pines and tangled vines. It was the kind of place that felt ancient, as if the trees themselves were keeping secrets. But this wasn't just a random forest. There was something about it. Something off. The air was too still. The birds were too quiet. And every now and then, the wind would pick up. But it never sounded like the normal rustling of trees. It sounded like whispers, soft, unintelligible words that made their skin crawl. As the group hiked deeper, they started to feel like they were being watched. At first, it was just an uncomfortable sense, a vague feeling that something wasn't right. But then, the house appeared. It was out of place. It shouldn't have been there. The building was old, decades, maybe even centuries old. Its weathered wooden exterior seemed to sag under the weight of time, with shutters hanging crooked and the roof barely holding itself together. But the worst part was its location. It was smack in the middle of the forest, miles away from any road, and yet, here it was, standing alone and silent, as if daring them to enter. The group hesitated, but curiosity is a powerful thing. They decided to go inside. As they stepped through the creaking door, the air turned cold, so cold it took their breath away. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet, like the house itself was waking up, aware of their presence. The inside of the house was even more unsettling. Dusty furniture sat in the corners, covered in thick white sheets, as if they had been abandoned for years. But the strangest part was the walls. They weren't just plain. There were strange symbols, scratched into the wood, as though someone had carved them with desperate hands. The floor was covered in old rugs, faded and torn. But the weirdest thing was the staircase. It led upward, but there was no second floor. It stopped right at a solid, immovable wall. The group wandered through the house, unsure of what to make of it. But as they moved, they began to hear the whispers. At first, they thought it was just the wind, but no. The whispers were distinct, and they seemed to be coming from everywhere. And then, one of them, Liam, disappeared. No warning, no sound. 1 second he was standing in the hallway, and the next, he was gone. No footsteps, no struggle, just vanished. Panic set in. They screamed his name, but the house was silent, as if it was watching them, waiting for them to make their next move. That was when they realized the house wasn't just abandoned. It had a life of its own. It was alive, and it wanted them. By the time they figured it out, it was too late. The house wasn't just a house. It was a trap. It fed on fear, on desperation, on the presence of anyone foolish enough to enter. One by one, they disappeared, pulled into the walls, dragged through hidden doors, and swallowed by the shadows. The few who managed to escape were never the same. They couldn't remember how they made it out, but they would never forget what they saw, and they never spoke of it again. That house is still there, deep in the woods, waiting for the next group of curious souls to wander too close. You've heard of haunted houses, right? But this one, it's different. It's in the middle of nowhere, hidden deep within an ancient forest. And it's been standing there for centuries, untouched by time. No one's dared to enter for as long as anyone can remember. But that didn't stop a group of friends from trying. And they didn't just find a spooky house. They found something far worse. Have you ever wondered what it's like to stumble into a place where the world feels wrong? Where every step you take makes your heart race a little faster? That's exactly what happened to these friends when they came across a crumbling house in the woods. But it wasn't the house that terrified them the most. It was the presence inside, and the terrible secret it kept hidden. What they thought would be a simple hike turned into a nightmarish fight for survival. And by the end of it, some of them wouldn't make it out at all. So, why is this place still standing? What is it about this house that no one has ever dared to touch it? You're about to find out. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway, just a few friends, looking to escape the chaos of their lives. They chose the forest, thinking it would be peaceful and relaxing. A chance to disconnect, breathe in fresh air, and maybe get a little lost in the beauty of nature. But they had no idea that the forest was hiding more than just trees. It was hiding a secret, a house, one that had been abandoned for years, maybe even decades. A house that no one talked about. It wasn't on any map. It wasn't on anyone's radar. Yet there it was, standing alone, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to swallow up the sunlight. As soon as they saw it, a sense of dread filled the air. No one could quite explain it, but they all felt it, like the house was alive, watching them, waiting for them. And when one of them, Ethan, suggested they check it out, no one could turn back. What was the worst that could happen, right? As they stepped off the main trail and walked toward the house, the air changed. The temperature dropped, as if the sun had just disappeared behind a thick cloud. Though the sky remained clear, the trees around them were unnaturally still, and the only sound was the crunch of dry leaves beneath their boots. It felt wrong, but they pressed on. The closer they got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The house looked like it had been abandoned for years. Its wooden walls were rotting, paint peeling, and the front door hung half open, creaking on its hinges in a way that didn't seem natural. The windows were dark, covered by old shutters that barely hung on. The place looked like it was begging to be left alone. But the group didn't listen. They stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and every surface was covered in grime. The floor creaked underfoot, and the faint scent of something rotting lingered in the air. A chill ran down their spines, but they pushed deeper into the house, drawn by the mystery that seemed to linger in every corner. They found old furniture, covered in sheets that looked as though they hadn't been touched in years. A fireplace sat empty, as if it had long been abandoned. But there was something off. The house felt like it had been frozen in time, like the world had passed it by. But it had never moved an inch. As they explored, they came across a strange door in the back of the house. It was small, almost hidden behind a pile of broken furniture, but it was locked. Ethan, always the curious one, found an old key in the kitchen drawer that seemed to fit. He unlocked the door, and that's when everything changed. Behind the door was a dark staircase that led down into what could only be described as a basement. The smell hit them first, earthy, damp, with a sharp, metallic tang to it. They hesitated at the top of the stairs, unsure of what they might find. But their curiosity got the better of them. As they descended into the dark, they felt the temperature drop even more, until they could see their breath in the cold, heavy air. The walls of the basement were lined with strange symbols, painted in what looked like blood, though they couldn't be sure. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to vibrate with an eerie energy. And then they saw her. In the corner of the room, a figure stood slumped over, as though it had been waiting for them. She was old, her skin pale and wrinkled, her long black hair tangled and matted. She wore a dark, tattered dress that seemed to blend into the shadows. Her eyes, when they opened, were black. No whites. Just black. And she smiled. The moment she moved, the house seemed to come alive. The walls groaned. The floor cracked. The whispers returned, louder this time, filling the air with an unholy chant that seemed to seep into their very souls. The witch didn't speak. She didn't need to. They could feel it in the air. She had been waiting. By the time the friends made it out of the house, only 2 of them were left. One had disappeared completely, and the other had been dragged away by the witch. They couldn't explain how they managed to escape, but they did, and they never spoke of that day again. The house is still there, hidden in the woods, waiting for the next group of curious souls to stumble upon it. People say the witch is still there too, watching, waiting, and if you listen closely enough, you might hear her whispers on the wind. But remember this, once you hear the whispers, it's already too late. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and keep the nightmares coming.